You're listening to Tonebender's Sound Design Podcast, presented by Sound Ideas. This is the show where we talk with the sonic artists behind our favorite films, games, and series. Take your sound design to the next level with the Creator Access Plan from Sound Ideas. This membership puts 100 downloads a year from over 630,000 world-class sounds right at your fingertips. Easy to search, simple to use, and built for creators. Power your next project with the sounds the pros trust. Go to soundideas.com to learn more. Hey everyone, this is Tim Muirhead, and I have a really special episode for you today. This is part one of a two-part series featuring a talk about the sonic world of Harry Potter with James Mather. James has been the supervising sound editor on 4 Harry Potter films, starting with Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, and then he stayed on through till the end with Half-Blood Prince and Deathly Hallows Part 1 and 2. James was kind enough to invite me down to his studio while I was in London for a long conversation about working on the Harry Potter films and how that opportunity completely changed his life. Coming up, James will be joining me as one of the speakers at the upcoming Sonic Days conference in Denmark next month on November 18th through 20th. He will be talking about his work on the Mission Impossible films, so if you like what you hear in this interview, consider heading out to Sonic Days to hear him in person, along with over 70 other speakers at this completely free conference. Head to sonicdays.com to find out all the details. Okay, let's get to this interview with James Mather and the sonic legacy of the Harry Potter films. So I'm going to give you a little bit of my history with Harry Potter.
Yes.
In maybe 2000, I was traveling through Europe with my girlfriend at the time.
Right.
Our plan was that we were going to rent a car and travel around. This was when booking things on the internet was a little more complicated than it is these days.
24 years ago, but that's mad.
We landed in Amsterdam. When we got to the car rental place, the booking that we had somehow disappeared and there was no car for us. So now we've got to, we get Eurorail passes. We're adapting on the fly. Nice. It ended up being the best thing that happened.
Much better.
But because my girlfriend at that time didn't drive. So I was going to be doing all the driving. So I hadn't brought a book with me. So now I'm going to be on the Eurorail for all this time. This was before iPods and everything. So I just went to the bookstore in the train station, which only had a small section of English books.
Right.
And our train was leaving in like 5 minutes. It was like everything was a whirlwind. So I just went in and, okay, Harry Potter, I've heard of that. Got it. The next day we got to, I think Stockholm was where we went next. And I'd finished the Harry Potter book.
Really?
And, well, the first book is quite small. In Stockholm, I find an English bookseller, get book 2. And I read the book. Well, they weren't even all out yet at that point.
Right.
So even though I was an adult, I was reading these children's books as traveling through Europe.
It's amazing how many people read it. How many people picked up reading again, having not read for years and years and years. And then as adults, they started reading, mainly to their kids. But then they became, it's very easy reading. Well, there's a limit to how much, furrowed brow you can have when you're reading. Especially with the amount of stuff the distractions that we've now got.
Yeah, for sure. One of the interesting things about the books is that there's actually quite a lot of sound stuff in the books. Yeah. So I'm curious, did you lean on the books at all for how things should sound when you were working on the films?
The assistants in the team were our kind of researchers, really, which was great because they were younger and they were more in tune with that era of fiction. And they knew all the books. So it was a really nice task to set them and say, can you go through the book? Order of the Phoenix was the first one for us to do. Their job was to go through and then make notes of the sound notes. So we had a sheet, a beat sheet, where all the sound notes in the book had been... And you're right, there was a lot. There was a lot very specific, a lot of thestral sound, the sounds of thestrals and the sounds of the Phoenix. And the Quidditch, the little ball. Snitch, that's the one. They were all really well described. So, we had this Bible that we built, which was quite fun. It's not every film you get to go through and, have that kind of direction. Mm-hmm. Being the success and the popularity that it had, you had to stick to. You couldn't veer off and decide you were going to turn it into something else or make it sound like something else. It had to be for the fans.
So you had kind of 2 sections of source material because you came on for film 5. Right?
5, yeah.
So
Yeah.
there was 4 films
Yeah.
already made before you were brought on.
Yeah.
So Eddie Joseph did the first one here
Eddie.
in London.
Yeah.
And then the next 3 were done in California, I
I
believe.
believe they were. They were done, I think, actually, I have a feeling that they were done in California and London, and they were mixed in the UK. I think they were all mixed in the UK.
Okay.
Because Heyday Films was based here. But I do think that Randy did 2, I think.
Randy Tom.
Yeah. And he was here a lot. So they used an English crew, or a portion of the English crew that had worked. So it was a combined effort, I believe. When we came on, I kept a portion of the crew that had done the previous ones because I wanted to maintain the continuity of language, and I didn't want to be starting from scratch trying to find where the sounds for this and that and what were the ideas behind the spells, who had steered those sound design moments. And without the previous team members, it was going to be impossible. So that kind of worked for the Phoenix. That got us into the saddle, and then from there on, because the nature of the subject changed quite a lot from being scary fun to being a little less fun and a little more scary, and that teenage kind of anxiety and a doubt and all those things that then became apparent in the characters. So from the moment Half-Blood Prince, we were in a position to start turning the screws a bit and making it a little bit more adult, if that's the right phrase, a little bit more intense and visceral, and we could use everything from prior productions, but ultimately we could bend it to make it now a darker thing. The Horcrux theme became prominent after the Phoenix, and that really sort of steered it in a different way. So it was nice. It was very liberating. It was nice to be able to move away from what everybody had got familiar with, and then to turn these spells into more muscular things and they were more angry and more emotional than they had been before. They were being playful before, and now they were getting a little stronger and a little bit more intense. It was a joyful challenge, really. You're given the foundation of certainty from the novels, from the books, and then you're allowed to weave in emotion through sound to try and emphasise the character of the people, the Malfoys, and the spite and the vitriol and the emotion. Yeah, so we were lucky. We were very lucky. It was an extraordinary voyage, actually. We all had a lot of fun doing it. We were challenged creatively to keep making it plausible, because clearly it's all fantasy, but you want it to feel visceral and real. And there's a wonderful, I think, Half-Blood Prince, where they're on a journey and it's just the 3 of them, and there's fighting between them and there's misunderstandings, and it's a very hard sell for a film that is directed towards kids. And somehow it seemed absolutely appropriate at that time in the storyline of the whole film that you should have that moment before the final chapter. It was beautiful. It was one of those amazing, it gave a real shape of dynamics to the soundtrack, which quite often you'd be in one place and then you'd apparate to somewhere else and it would be equally chaotic and equally maddening. And this gave the whole show, the whole arc of the series, really, a moment to kind of get in the heads of the 3 leading characters. And it also gave us a dynamic range to start. Okay, from here we're now moving into somewhere else. The snatches and the guys chasing across the moors and through the woods and all that became much more of a physical thing as opposed to just a magical thing. It was something else. It was quite threatening. A lot of variety. I was very, very lucky. It was an extraordinary project. To do 1 is extraordinary. To do 4 was mind-blowing, and such a lovely director. Very, very encouraging and very keen that people expressed themselves and got their creative mojo, flowing, and very, very, very dialed into the emotion. So it was always about making sure that the sound storyline was about the emotion, along with the music, obviously. Possibly one of the first times, because of the nature of the soundtrack and because it's so versatile and it's so varied, it's very easy to get lost trying to tell a story, of what the focus is. What is the story that you're telling? Is it about a car that flies? No, it's not. It's about the people inside it. And so for me, it was a really big learning curve about the pilot in the box notion. The person is the storyline, and keeping the sound tied to that person is vital to encourage the audience to be immersed with their character. David was very, very focused on that, and very articulate in how he wanted that to be maintained and portrayed. So we had this extraordinary insight into doing a kind of drama, but with a huge soundscape, which you don't normally get. Notes on a Scandal is a beautiful film. It's an extraordinary story and the characters were amazing, but the sound didn't ever really have to do the character. It just did the world that they inhabited. And so this is a very different, and subsequently, same now with Tom Cruise movies, it's very much about the character and their experience that they want the audience to then also feel. And it's about this immersive, and sound is an additional tool, lever to keep the audience tied in. But that was, for me, Potter was the first time that we'd had that focus and encouragement to really hone that and to understand it. So sounds become more emotional for the person, and the Horcruxes become more relevant for the people involved, and for Harry particularly, obviously. So it was a huge learning curve. It's I've never stopped learning, but for me that was the project which I remember saying to my brother afterwards. I said, I very much doubt I'll ever get to work on anything like that again, because it wasn't just about the fact that it was a film with a huge fan base and massive expectations and a history and creating its own future. But it was about the collaboration. It was one of those situations where the collaboration was very open and unique, and the editor and the director and the producers were all very familial. It had that feeling about it, which Ken Branagh has as well in the way he works with the people that he works with. He likes to have that sense of community and camaraderie. It's a lovely way to work, really is.
Yeah, why wouldn't you want to have that?
I know. And that's the thing you don't realise until you've got it, how lucky and how wonderful it is as a way to progress. And you want that in every scenario. It kind of, you want to encourage that. I spend a lot of my time encouraging my crew to have that same sort of, open-hearted, open-minded approach to what they're doing. It's unpredictable, our business. It's not, so you have to enjoy it to the maximum all the time, as much as you can. And even when it's tough, it's not a bad job. Tough ain't that tough.
We're not digging ditches.
No,
for
we're
sure.
not digging ditches, exactly, or curing leather.
You came in for the final 4 films.
Yes.
With David Yates as director of all 4 of those.
Yes.
What was your relationship with him?
We'd never met. I was put forward by one of the mixers who did the previous one, Mike Presswood-Smith, who was also up to mix this Order of the Phoenix, and he was asked if he could recommend any sound supervisors, designers, and he very kindly put me forward along with numerous other people. I went to a meeting with David Heyman and David Yates, and I'd just done Notes on a Scandal, I think, not that long before. And I'd done a film with Terry Gilliam called Tideland, which was bonkers.
Implied if you say Terry Gilliam.
Yes, exactly. And wonderfully so. I mean,
of course.
Wonderfully so. So I guess those films had a kind of intrigue because they were slightly offbeat in a way, but also very straight in another way. Anyway, we had a very nice chat. And what I really liked about David's approach, because he was also stepping into this arena, which was his first venture into a big tentpole movie. He is an incredibly good drama director, accomplished, and he's an excellent director, lovely guy. And he, I think, also felt that it would be very nice to open the opportunity out to a fresh team, a new, his editor was on board, who he worked with all the time, Mark Day, and Mark had a sound guy that he would also like. We folded him into our team as well. So it was very inclusive, and it was that opportunity of, let's try and do this slightly differently. Let's not just have the same people that are all that tier, which I guess I'm now in. But at the time, animation and drama and the odd quirky, but not tentpoles. I hadn't really ventured into tentpoles. I mean, Chicken Run became very successful, but it was never a tentpole movie to start with. He took a risk, really. He took a gamble, and I remember walking back across the Hungerford Bridge to get the train at Waterloo, for having been told that they'd like me to join, and I couldn't feel my feet. It was like I was floating. It was the most bizarre experience. Everything was in my head. I was just so excited, terrified, elated. It was a lovely feeling. It was bizarre. It was really bizarre. I'll never forget it. And it meant that, David created a team behind him with new people and some of the old, especially the visual effects people, were those that had done a lot. But what it did is it created a team that were there for him. That they were there to support him and make sure that they worked under his guidance and that they delivered what he was after. He didn't have to, I'm sure it wasn't the main reason, but he didn't have to rub up against old ideas and traditions. It gave him the freedom to explore a new avenue, which was very brave of him. Because again, it was a big movie.
Well, and the easy thing to do would be to keep everybody around.
Keep the village, yeah, absolutely.
Make it his own is brave, but obviously turned out to be the smart move.
Yeah, he was very supportive, and it's an extraordinary break. It taught me a lot about doing exactly that. Getting people through the door as an apprentice or as a trainee, who might not ever have considered this as a profession or have done nothing else but want to do this as a profession. And it's that thing of not giving the job to the person that happened to be there on the day or a friend of a friend, but actually to advertise that job and interview people and take it seriously. A traineeship is potentially the start of somebody's life in the movie industry. So it made me very aware and very keen to replicate that opportunity of giving somebody a chance to come through the door and start working. And still a thing I do now. It's like, you never just choose somebody based on the fact they made a nice cup of tea. You choose them on the fact that you've seen quite a few people and there's a lot to weigh up. It's not just a chance thing. It has to be it has to be understood. It's a big deal. And I think when it is a big deal, people take it seriously and they do a lot more about it, and they care a lot more about it, and they appreciate the fact that they've been selected from a group as opposed to just having been by chance. So, I learnt loads. I learnt loads from that process. I grew up.
Speaking of evolving the team, but also the sound of Harry Potter.
Yeah.
One thing that I noticed, well, not only I, many people have noticed, is that the beginning of the series, when someone did a spell, they would say the word, the spell would kind of power up, and then it would hit.
Yes.
Where starting with Order of the Phoenix, the words and the spells were happening simultaneously, almost like the words were what were making the spell shoot out, instead of them being like a different, it was a different sequencing.
Yeah, it wasn't an evocation, it was a deliverance of magic, yeah.
So obviously that had to be talked about before shooting.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk through that and maybe any other ways the sound might have evolved?
Well, again, we went on the emotion of the performances. So yes, David had accelerated the process of magic summoning and delivery and had made it far more combative. One of the things that anybody will find when trying to put sounds together, certainly if you're processing animal sounds into something a bit more specific, if you're putting a squeal from a pig into a magic effect, it shouldn't be obviously a squeal of a pig. It's an element that helps. The moment you start doing anything with manipulation, it has a tendency to become very sci-fi and very Star Wars and lasers and especially with that speed and brevity of the actual spell. So we got into looking at very percussive, very energetic, muscular kind of elements that would allow it to punch on release, because what we wanted to do was to clear the space so the impact of the spell was as profound as the spell itself. So the spell would be, apart from, I think the only time where it really went on, there's a lovely scene where Harry's trying to destroy the brooch, the Horcrux brooch, and he's zapping it in the woods, and it's the response of the brooch is more important than the zap of the wand, because the Horcrux is squealing. You want the audience to pick up on the response of the spell, not the spell itself. It's almost like the magic has been done and recognised and everybody understands what the magic does. Now they have learnt how to summon magic and make it appear and do things. Now it's about what they do with it. Now it's about defending themselves against Death Eaters in the underpass. It's about, destroying the Horcrux. It's about preventing harm to others, or it's about harming others. And there's some dark magic, there's a scene, one of the girls is suspended in the air in the snow. I think this is in Half-Blood Prince. But I remember seeing it, and she's suspended in the air, screaming, but she's not moving. And so there's no scream, it's just this hollow breath. And then she slams to the ground really hard, and it's like, oh, it's like The Exorcist, this is really dark. We started to explore the impact of the magic and the effect it would have on the person or the object that was being spelled. It's always evolving because it's always about the emotion of the moment, and it's always about who's delivering it and for what reason. But we had a huge library of whooshes and zaps, but what we wanted to do was to try and add character to the spells so that they had a little bit of Harry in, or a little bit of Hermione, or something that was relative to the character. Certainly on the impacts and the battle scenes, it kind of developed throughout the process. There's a lot of very short zap, bang, crash, that's it, percussive. Their spell casting became almost nonchalant. They could do it without even thinking about it and saying it. It almost became second thought in some sequences. The final battle with Voldemort at Hogwarts was one of those. I think the Order of the Phoenix, we had it where Dumbledore is fighting Voldemort, and there's fire and snakes and water and broken glass, and so there was this just cacophony of different frequencies and different sounds and different impacts, and it was a tug of war. It was what was winning, what was, and the swirling of water, all really hard sounds to make pleasant to sort of feel in the moment. But the final battle, the standoff with Harry and Voldemort, where they are pouring molten liquid out of their wands, and it's literally, pushing and pulling, and an amazing effect. Probably one of my favourite sound moments in any movie, where you've got the life and death and everything being poured into it, and this kind of rage of anger in the spell, in the fluid that is being wrestled. And then the music kicks in, and it's that wonderful stepping up of character, then the magic and the power of it, then the second surge of it with Harry's advantage, and the whole escalation of it was just, it gives me goosebumps watching it now. It's one of those fantastic moments where you think, we've never got this big before. Even when the Horcrux was trying to set Ron off with, telling Harry that Hermione was in love with her, and there's this huge billowing kind of crazy smoke liquidy creature, then nothing gets as big as that moment with Voldemort. It was an extraordinary opportunity for that build throughout. You don't realise as you're going through the series, the director clearly has an idea about how, also you make a movie, you don't expect to make the next one, you kind of do one and you're great, that was amazing, and it became consistently kind of like, okay, this, now we're going to do the next one, and this has to happen as a result of that one. This has to now be the thing. So people become tied together through the fortune of success, but also through the narrative continuity that we're all on this journey and we have to carry everything through to this conclusion, which you don't know when you're in that position. I didn't know that was the case, but I enjoyed doing it. And the other thing was it not becoming an issue whereby magic became the feature. Magic was a byproduct of the emotions and the characters. And that was very much David's thing. It was very much about how, the apparition sequences where they vanish into the woods from escaping the ministry. And all those amazing moments were about them apparating. So you've got the whoosh and the fire flume and everything else, and then you've got them tearing through the cosmos, wherever they're travelling through, and you're seeing them being distorted. And the important bit is them, not the world of magic around them. And it's the same with all the spells. It became much more about, if all the spells are super duper, mega, the Horcrux isn't going to be powerful enough.
One of the things that I've heard was told to the people who started on the first film.
Eddie and his crew.
Yeah, Eddie and his crew.
maybe this is two questions for you, but they were told to stay away from Star Wars sounds. So I believe the way that you would go there is to try and be more organic than that.
Yeah. But the moment you start processing stuff, you're in that world of everything starts sounding a little bit techy and futuristic. The fact that they made them explosive, the fact that the visuals kept a fairly explosive and percussive rhythm to the spells and the discharging of the spells, and meant that it didn't have to be... you could avoid it being too much like a laser gunshot. That said, there are some sequences where you've got 9 or 10 kids running around, wizards, everyone all firing at each other. And you can't,
or in the Deathly Hallows, like 70.
Exactly. And you just can't help it sounding like laser. It sounds like, something out of Battlestar Galactica or Star Wars. It's a white light that goes from right to left and hits the wall. And it's okay. So what do? We have to lose the passage sound, the whoosh sound. We have to make that less obvious, because that travel sound there's a scene where they rescue the dragon. There's dialogue, there's dragon, there's lasers, there's wand spells from the bankers and the guards, and actually it's you take out the travel sound and you make it just and then it stops being quite so sci-fi, and it loses that sense of, even though you can see the line across the screen of the spell travelling. So it's just a case of dialing back and saying, okay, the important thing is where it's hitting and how much jeopardy that puts our characters in. So that's the thing that we have to focus on, is the expelling. Yeah, fine, that's small sound, but the big sound is on the impact. The danger is on the impact. So that was very much the focus. And then you're saying, well, what's it hitting? It's hitting stone. So we have, you have the breakup of stone and debris, or metal, and it has a slightly comic, ricochet ping. It's all part of the percussive nature of that scene. And then you've got the long bale, sort of wail calls of the dragon that aren't percussive. And so you're allowing yourself that sort of fluid soundscape there. You've got the dialogues, and then you've got these cracking spells. Every fight, you'd be going, what's happening here? Because the visual effects guys would be doing it, last minute as they're getting towards the end, and things might change unexpectedly. So you'd always start with here's our bank of Expelliarmuses. We'll use 6 of those and 3 of those, and you sort of hone it down as the visual effects come in. You start to tweak, as everyone does, as we all do now. You start to refine it and make it as simple and as expressive as possible. And I think, obviously in sci-fi films, they rely quite heavily on that sense of the travel of the sound. Visually, it's very prominent. So that was the most successful way of avoiding being laser-like.
So it's weird because Harry Potter, it's not really a fantasy genre, but that's the box that I'm going to put it in for this.
Yeah.
So sci-fi and fantasy get compared a lot, but they're actually quite different.
Yeah.
Just before Harry Potter, at least the films that you were working on, the biggest fantasy trilogy of all time, probably The Lord of the Rings, Peter Jackson's.
Yeah.
And it kind of introduced this idea of the ring talking.
Yes.
That the Horcruxes kind of took to another level and went in different directions from.
Yeah, interesting.
But did you draw any influence from those other films? Or?
I loved Lord of the Rings. I read all the books as a kid, and I think what I loved about them the most is their humanity. Every character in it was relatable, and every passage within it was a journeyman's story. It was all about learning how you change in the world around you. And that's very much what tells a good story. I mean, that is repeated in so many films. What was really nice and really interesting about the way that this story told that narrative was that it was through growing up. It wasn't through experiencing the world that you travelled through as much as it was the world that you grow into. And so the recognition of that world and your place in it was emphasised by the danger and the threat and the mission that they were then given to accomplish with Voldemort and finding the Horcruxes. And this notion that you reveal that there are many parts of this character that need to be destroyed in order to get the... And yes, it's ring-like in the way that the ring in Lord of the Rings brings great power. The Horcruxes actually diminish power. it's an inverted kind of process, but it's the same goal as storytelling, to bring people together for one common cause. While there was a lot of similarity because storytelling is storytelling, there was also a lot of unique opportunity to do it in a way that the three characters are so different in many ways, and they all rely on their differences as to be as strong as possible. So you've got an extraordinary script based on an extraordinary book in an extraordinary world that is sometimes prosaic and normal and what we, the world that we know, and other times it's completely, it's the world of, giant snakes ripping through houses and dragons and ripping through banks, and but they're all closely related. That was the thing that was so extraordinary, was that it was in the modern day that all this stuff was happening. So you had this parallel, which is incredibly engaging and incredibly exciting. It was great fun to do with sound because you're setting up the ambience of the world that but then you're twisting it and you're saying it's not all what it seems to be. And they haven't had to travel to a new world. They are simply in the world that they exist in, our world, and their universe or their experiences are on a different level. But it's something we all know, and the Muggles are there, and we're all part of it. So it's very inclusive. In the soundtrack, you want to make that familiarity and that juxtaposition of the two things, of the Hogwarts and the Muggles, and you want to have that because it includes everybody who watches the film. Everybody who watches the film now wants to go to the train station and stand on platform 5, whatever it is, 9.5 or 4, I can't remember the number. The reality of it, the drama of it, as it were, the real world, draws everybody in. Everybody knows it. It's familiar. And there's a nostalgia to it, and there's a romance to it, and there's the quaint English countryside, but then also all these amazing parts of Scotland and incredible landscapes that they go to. And it's a bit of everything, but it's very tied in the normality, the normalcy of the way we live our life, which I think is what makes it stand out and be unique in that way, or was. Lord of the Rings was a very, very different notion of something quite similar, similar idea, but in a totally different world with totally different characters and beautifully done. I mean, being a fan of the book, and I'm sure there were a lot of Harry Potter readers who were anxious about the idea of a film being made until that moment existed purely in their head, and the characters and the creatures were all exactly as they had them in their head and as they were described, which is another reason why sound was so visceral in the book, because it really helped to create the world that J.K. wanted. But I remember seeing Lord of the Rings and thinking, wow, wow, this is awesome. They've done it. They managed to do it. And I think that luckily that's kind of what Harry Potter did as well.
Okay, that is it for part 1 of my interview with James Mather about his sound work on the Harry Potter films. Stay tuned in the coming weeks for part 2. Big thanks to James for having me out to his studio and letting me hang out with him for a little while. Speaking of hanging out with James, he and I will both be at the Sonic Days conference from November 18th through 20th in Denmark. This entirely free conference has announced its schedule, and you can find out who all the speakers will be by going to sonicdays.com. Thanks for listening today. We'll talk to you soon. Take your sound design to the next level with the Creator Access Plan from Sound Ideas. This membership puts 100 downloads a year from over 630,000 world-class sounds right at your fingertips. Easy to search, simple to use, and built for creators. Power your next project with the sounds the pros trust. Go to soundideas.com to learn more. Tonebenders is produced by me, Timothy Muirhead. Theme music is by Jim Guthrie. You can reach me via email through info@tonebenderspodcast.com. Follow Tonebenders on Instagram to stay on top of new episodes. If you like the show, you can help us out by spreading the word to your friends and colleagues, or leave us a tip. Just go to tonebenderspodcast.com and click support.